eating in a place we've never been.
Well, why don't we eat something, then we'll go and get something to eat. And we'll see that thing we're supposed to see. They probably got a snack bar there, right? After that, we should probably get something to eat, though. Then we'll eat something. Because, you know, there's...
A lot of you liked people that I really couldn't play in the classroom because of the language used. Spanish. Pardon?
We're all adults here.
Oh, well, but I'm not. I'm still a kid. However, so today we're going to talk about fallacies. Back to my syllabus there. Go back one. So yes, today. So we'll start off talking about chapter 4, fallacies. But halfway through, actually probably sooner than halfway, we're going to switch and start talking about categorical propositions, because next class we have our we have our first test due, which is the one that we already talked about the very first night. Those 6 essay questions, pick 3, email me those. But I'm looking at our where's our test due? Oh, okay, so that's July 9th. So that's okay, so we'll have time. But that's the one where we're going to do syllogisms, and I really want to make sure you get those. They're not hard, and a lot of you might even pick them up so fast that you're bored almost immediately. However, for some reason it is difficult for some folks, so we'll really do a lot of those to make sure everybody feels comfortable with them. And I think that's really one of the highlights of the class, even, is getting syllogisms done. As far as I know, none of the other classes you could take in our curriculum here will give you those, except for this class. So we'll make sure we cover syllogisms here. If you take statistics, you get a lot of great stuff, but if you and I know there's, 5 or 6 different types of statistics classes, depending on your major, you could take. But you don't get syllogisms. And syllogisms come up in all sorts of texts and things, so you should be familiar with them. You would be able to do some. They're the kind of thing that monks would memorize so that they could have debates with one another. And the faster they could do it, the higher the prize they would win. That kind of thing. So we'll talk about fallacies tonight to get started, but then we're going to switch over to categorical propositions. So what's a fallacy? First off, there's a big separation between what are called formal fallacies and informal fallacies. And the chapter we have is primarily about informal fallacies. But what a formal fallacy is when you're trying to give a deductively valid argument and you screw it up. So in that case, you've tried to be formally correct and give a formal argument, but because you've actually given a form that's an invalid form, it's a formal fallacy. And so really we'll get into those once we've actually done some formal arguments. But informal fallacies are the kinds of fallacies where even the form of the argument isn't really a successful attempt at giving a deductively valid argument. The odd thing is that informal fallacies are very, very popular, and one of the main reasons for it is because psychologically they could be very persuasive. So the interesting problem, and one of the reasons why studying fallacies is really important for folks, is these are the kinds of things where people take advantage of other people by using informal fallacies as part of their arguments. Because of their psychological ability to be persuasive, you're likely to be persuaded and then end up buying a mattress at way more than, it should be, or, buying a car that doesn't really run, not realizing that it doesn't come with tires, this crazy stuff, right? Being taken advantage of, renting the house, giving the, what's it called when you pay a certain amount ahead of time for a security deposit.
Oh.
You can tell how long between being in the Army and owning my own home, I don't remember what a security deposit. Sorry, that's dumb, I suppose. Army never charged you a security deposit. They get you on the way out, though.
Yeah,
They do. Yeah. Wow, okay, now it's gotta be clean. Clean to our specifications, which is that you have to hire these ladies to clean it.
It's always dirtier when you first rent it than when it is when you leave.
So that's kind of fun. But once you learn how that works, you realize right up front, don't clean it, you pay them, and they will clean it. Or whatever they do. So that's good. So, fallacies. Let's go through. I'll try to be entertaining. Which is where the jokes come in. Some of these can be as boring as dirt. Although dirt can be really quite fascinating depending on your interest. My oldest son's father-in-law sells dirt. He's got one of the farms out in Palmer that is in a position where the silt blowing in from the glacier just builds up dirt so much that he grows grass, and every spring, I guess, or all through the summer even, he cuts it up into rolls, puts it on a truck, sells it to people that don't have enough dirt. So he sells sod, he calls it sod. Also sells hay. He has two of the original barns from the group of people that were brought up here during the Dust Bowl. It's kind of cool. Okay. So let me look at chapter 4. Begins on page
119.
Okay. So why study fallacies? So you're not taken to the cleaners by folks, for the most part. And not just that, of course. It's when you're arguing with people, you certainly can grow. Now, you think we're logical people because our brains are rational. That's the way it's supposed to be. Right? So you would think we have the ability to walk into rooms without crashing into walls because we know where we've learned, right? That's a door. You could use the door. You can't climb up and use the window. All that sort of thing. Unless it's Romeo and Juliet, that's different, right? So you figure we're logical. If that's the case, why do we make logical mistakes? And that's clearly something that happens. And you can even see that in our elected officials quite frequently, actually, that they make. That should have been a joke, but no one's following what's happening, I guess. Did anyone here, one of our State Department officials who are in the diplomatic corps that are in Germany, that we've sent to Germany, in talking about D-Day, the other D-Day, actually said, so clearly the United States and Germany have a history of working closely together. That's not so much a fallacy as a factual error of significant proportions. And she was smiling while she did that. But I'm not going to do any blonde jokes.
She knew what she was doing.
She did. But, well, maybe I will. I won't do a blonde joke. I'll just read one. So it's not my fault. knew I wouldn't be able to do blonde jokes class. But I'll just basically maybe go over it. How many blondes are in the room? None, right? Officially. Well, I'll just kind of, so a ventriloquist with a puppet, that's usually doing a whole bunch of blonde jokes. And one of the women in the audience who's blonde complains and very formally says, that's it, you're not supposed to make those kinds of jokes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're treating blondes as if they're, that's silly, et cetera. Plus, it's an affront to all women in general, et cetera. And the ventriloquist was very embarrassed, and so he started by saying, I apologize. And at that point, the blonde said to him, "Not you, young man. I'm talking to that short little guy next to him." I'm embarrassed. I shouldn't have said that. By the way, he's using the jokes as examples, so it's not like he's intending to offend people either. Some of his jokes are actually quite good. This one, I remember this one because this was a Jack Benny joke where he was being held up by a stick-up robber who says, "Your money or your life." And Jack Benny, if you ever remember seeing him, just kind of stood there pondering. And the stick-up robber says, "Your money or your life." And Jack Benny says, "I'm thinking it over." Famous for being a miser. So that requires you knowing that he's framed already as a miser and so. So why study fallacies? Because they're bad. You should be aware of them. We often encounter arguments that appear to be incorrect. Page 120 I am, if you're looking. But on close inspection, they lack real merit. Trying to pin down why can be a challenge on part of the game. Here, or part of the game. Homer, not a bear in sight. The bear patrol must be working like a charm. Lisa, that's spacious reasoning, Dad. This is Homer Simpson, right? Everybody knows Homer Simpson. Thank you, dear. By your logic, I could claim that this rock keeps tigers away. Homer? Oh, how does it work? In other words, he's not getting the joke, right? Lisa is the smart one in the family. Everyone knows that, right? Oh, how does it work? It doesn't work, says Lisa. Lisa, it's just a stupid rock. Uh-huh, says Homer. But I don't see any tigers around, do you? Homer, Lisa, I want to buy your rock. He's ready to buy the rock because it keeps tigers away. But that's ignorance, ignorance is bliss kind of thing. I've never seen a bear in these woods right around this building, so I'm sure there aren't any there. That's false, by the way. Someone has in fact been attacked by a bear right in these woods, right here near the firehouse a few years ago, but nonetheless, they come here. This is like a conduit for bears to go from the woods up in the mountains down onto the post, etc. So they follow the river. So just so you know, there are bears in the woods. There are mostly moose, though, and moose are actually more dangerous than bears, especially when they have calves. Everybody here knows that, right? Don't go pet Mother Moose or her calves. Everybody knows that. I don't think that's a fallacy. That's just dumb. So formal fallacy, notice our little bullet comments on the side. It's a logical error that occurs in the form or structure of an argument. So those are formal fallacies. Informal fallacies give me the ball or I will beat you in the head, right? So there's no attempt there to give a formally valid argument. This is called the ad baculum. I will hit you with the bat, right? Ad baculum. So it's not even an attempt to be scientifically correct. You can think of it that way too. When we talk about being formal, we're thinking scientifically correct, right? So that it's good reasoning, basically, right? But nonetheless, notice the psychological persuasiveness of that. The big bully, the big bully says, "I'm going to use your face to mop the floor." So, well, you're not going to be very happy about that. Oh, why? Because my face won't enable you to get into the corners? That's a joke, yes. The bully's obviously going to be able to do whatever he wants with me because of, size, etc. He's been doing weightlifting, etc. So he's the kind of guy that can't put his arms down, like Arnold. Okay. So fallacies based on personal attacks or emotional appeals. The first group that we get. So for example, the ad hominem, this is page 122, the ad hominem, which they add to it abusive in their title, right? Ad hominem is where you're picking on someone. The fallacy is distinguished by an attack on alleged character flaws of a person. So blonde jokes, for example. Trump jokes, I suppose. Those kinds of jokes. You should not believe what he says about our economy because he is a left-leaning, card-carrying liberal. Instead of actually listening to the argument, trying to figure out whether his explanations of how the economy works, etc. Anyway, if you want the baddest news, is baddest a word? I don't think so. Worst we go, right? But baddest is really good. You like baddest, right? The baddest news came out a couple summers ago, was by a French economist named Thomas Piketty. It was titled Capital, that should be alarming because that's the title of one of Karl Marx's famous books. And basically he laid out in very clear statistical terms exactly why it is the case that the middle class is gone and will never come back. Unless, of course, we take over the government and make sure that the government taxes all the rich and gives the money away to everybody else. That's the only solution, which of course we're not going to do. Doing just the opposite, actually, right? Okay. So Thomas Piketty, if you're show and tell, highly recommend this if you're interested. But you could always just say that his arguments are false. He's a liberal, he's French. That's enough, right? He's French, and he's a liberal, so therefore he must be wrong. So that's a fallacious argument. Personal attack. Poisoning the well. So, ad hominem circumstantial. How many of you have lived in Alaska for more than a few years? Much everyone? Entrez, s'il vous plaît. Oh, I'm speaking French. Je ne parle pas le français. I don't speak French. Every once in a while, slip in there. Pardon?
What page are you on?
I am on 122. So, everyone raised their hand, I think, and said that you had lived here. You had not, but maybe you were not. What's your name?
Warren.
Warren.
Yep.
You have a brother named Peace?
I do not. Not the first time I've heard that one, though.
Really? Warren Peace? Be a joke. I actually tried to read War and Peace in Russian once while I was at Middlebury. It was a hot summer. It was a good, nice air-conditioned library, and they had a Russian copy of War and Peace, so I started to read it and discovered that my French was not good enough. That's kind of weird, isn't it? But even though it's a Russian novel, all of the conversations between the noble classes is in French, which would have been historically accurate. And so you see the problem. If the French isn't good enough, you can't read the Russian novel. It's weird. Howard. So sorry about it, but War and Peace. Now I'll remember. Maybe War. But so, if you've lived in Alaska, then you've received, or at least your parents have received, a permanent fund check for you. Yes?
Right.
Which comes from oil. Right? So obviously, you're all prejudiced in favor of the oil companies. Yes? No? Well, what am I doing? That's a fallacious argument, right? So that's an example of an ad hominem circumstantial. It's just circumstantial that you receive money from the oil companies, but that doesn't mean that you're pro-oil necessarily, right? That would be a circumstantial example. Business person has business relationships with business magnates in Russia and France and Italy and gosh, all over the world, right? Oh, run for office, turns out, well, you've been having relationships with all of these foreigners. I bet they're all trying to influence our government. You could be the Manchurian candidate. It's clearly circumstantial as well. In fact, you're just doing your job. In fact, if you were hired so that you could be a diplomat with Russia, you're automatically dealing with Russia, and that's part of your job. That's kind of weird. Could you get in trouble? Why is it possible for people to be in trouble legally for colluding, that's the word, right, with Russians while trying to get a candidate elected? That's pretty clear, right? Why? Why would that be?
It's not in the best interest of the American public.
Well, I mean, you know, I have to admit, I went to lawyer friends of mine and I say, why would that even be a concern? And they said, it's against the law. How did we break that law? Do you ever watch French news? You can, though. If you go, let's see. How many hours in a day? 24, right?
23.
23 and a half?
30.
Depends on where you live, right?
I'm a question. Dang.
Now, this is
They
just
have
the weather.
much more fun music.
This is just weather, and don't get too alarmed because it's
Celsius.
Celsius. Yes. So that doesn't mean that it's below freezing everywhere. But so this is
32 degrees.
so you can watch French news.
repealed it, so now it's up to Congress to.
Привет, это Любовь Соболь. И сегодня я расскажу вам о том, что меня очень сильно бесит. Меня бесит, когда мою страну, а именно бюджет моей страны, в которой я исправно плачу налоги, используют для своего личного обогащения. Я даже не про тупое воровство или людей типа Тимченко.
I won't go through all of them, but I mean, as far as I know, you could watch news live from, I think, just about every country there is. Yes?
For
Here.
North Korea.
I don't know. I think you can. I haven't checked, actually. Clearly Korean news. I think so, though.
Maybe with
It might be
the treaty.
propaganda. Oh, with the
South
treaty,
Korea.
yeah.
They have one news network for like the entire.
Korea?
I thought they didn't have the internet, like no outside influence.
Well,
That's internally.
The news is by the government.
Only the elite had it. They try to eliminate Western culture.
So it's just the government.
Right, but they clearly use that as their propaganda tool
Yeah.
to convince us that they're nice people, that they have a wonderful country, etc. Right? So as far as I know, all of the countries of the world are all trying to affect or influence our elections. I don't know why all of a sudden it should be. And by the way, do we try to influence their elections?
Of course.
Yeah.
See why I'm confused. We've already heard lots of reasons why I'm confused, but there's.
It's illegal for us to do it, but it's not illegal for the government to do it, so it's the same.
And yet, as far as I could tell, everybody does it to everybody else. That's what I'm trying to persuade you to think in certain ways. My wife bought me a T-shirt that says, "I'm not trying. I don't want you to think like me. I just want you to think."
For me.
Well, just it's a T-shirt, so you can't have too much writing, otherwise, people will be. Oh, don't pass me until I finish. You know how that would be, right? In the you wouldn't get anything done because people would be constantly reading your. By the way, that's really embarrassing when you're a woman and I'm supposed to read your clothing.
Yeah.
That and the year they came out with stuff written on the rear end of people, that was just horrendous because I experienced literal breakdowns on the pavement, because I was taught absolutely to read everything you see, period. And then at the same time I was told never stare at certain parts of people's bodies. So suddenly I'm like in a situation which is totally,
You're in a paradox.
which is a dilemma in Latin. Paradoxa is Greek for two things you have to believe. Dilemma is two things you have to believe in Latin. So it's just fun. So I was stuck. What do I do? Until someone rebooted me. Got me started again. Okay. So, ad hominem circumstantial. If you're running for political office and you're a billionaire, I'm sure you're colluding with everybody in the world if you can make money off of it. So how can you be a billionaire, run for political office, and not be in trouble for all your business connections? Seems interesting. By the way, I'm not an apologist for Trump. But just like some of the stuff that people have tried to do against him seems just absolutely ridiculous. However, so poisoning the well. The fallacy occurs when a person is attacked before. Now, why does it say she has a chance to present her case? Why did Stan do that?
Sexist.
That gets into the whole issue of if you're writing a book. Did somebody do that?
That was there when I walked in. I was the first one in.
It's very well done. So I'll leave it there. Pro tem, right?
Staring at me is creepy.
Okay.
Now it's just
Is that
a
better?
black soulless boy with a little bit of light left in him.
So, when I was a kid growing up, reading books, they all said he. Right? So if you're going to use a pronoun for people in general, you should just use he, right? Well, but of course that's pretty clearly sexist. So you should figure, well, we should add she. You might even want to put she first. Depends, right? But if you want to put he, she, right? And then, of course, not too many years ago, we started discovering there are some folks in between. So we added. So you could use this as your pronoun instead of she. But be careful, especially. Pardon?
They or them.
They or them. But the problem there is grammatically, that's a plural. So you have to.
That person.
What about
Yeah.
desires or
Zai. Desires or.
Of course,
Say
the
that.
problem with this is if you start saying it too fast, you get he shit. Which.
Just can't say it too fast.
Yeah, don't say it too fast.
Take your time.
I don't know if the French can be helped. The French only have he and she. So that's pretty tough
Everything
on the
there's
French.
masculine and feminine.
Pardon?
Everything in their language is masculine.
Yes, yes. We,
Same thing with Spanish.
Pretty sure it's the same with Korean.
which is weird because Latin has all three. So how did they just lose the neuter when they went to France? So poisoning the well. So before you read her article, Stop All Wars, you should know that she was arrested 6 times for protesting in front of the Pentagon and White House. She has also been investigated by the that's all, bottom of page 123. So I'm telling you all this stuff about her or him or whatever. So don't even listen to this person, basically. You're already poisoned against whatever argument the person has, right? So, but there are some people that I think deserve that kind of treatment. I can't remember his name. Are you familiar with the guy who just, he's horrible when he shows up and he gives speeches, he's horrible, and so a lot of schools don't want him there, and yet other schools hire him to come and, you know who I mean? Offhand. Christina is terrific, but she was in a.
My guest this week is a speaker, an author,
There he is.
and host.
I borrow the term from those delicate ladies of the T-shirts, and there was a time, and it's still true, in many parts, who have hardly any education beyond high school, and their chances of making it into the middle class are very slim to none. There was a time in this country where all you had to do was graduate from high school.
This guy got banned from Twitter.
A single bit of maths, then you'll get something like 10%. Right? What this doesn't take into account is different choices that women make. It doesn't take into account,
So, yeah, I wouldn't recommend him. So, poisoning the well, I think that actually makes sense if there's reasons for it, sufficient reasons for it. But it could also, in an opposite sense, for example, when I argued Charles Murray, brilliant, we should listen to Charles Murray. Francis Fukuyama, we should listen to Francis Fukuyama, right? That's kind of the opposite. I'm sweetening the well instead of poisoning the well. You know, listen to this person and give them more credence instead of less. Does that make sense? But in a way, that's still prejudicing your point of view before you listen to their argument. You're already predisposed to think that their argument's a good one because of who they are, as opposed to thinking their argument's a poor one because of who they are, right? The main thing, of course, is you actually have to examine the evidence of the argument itself. That's how I can argue well. So, tu quoque, which means you too, page 124. So this is the person that's not happy with their employer, perhaps, and they don't feel like they're getting paid enough, and so if they get the chance, they steal from their employer. And their argument is, well, they're stealing from me, so I'm going to steal from them. So, tu quoque. That kind of, the same as you know, you're doing it too, you know, if you're lying, I'll lie too, whatever, right, tu quoque. You have been lecturing me about not joining a gang, but Dad, you were a gang member and you never went to jail, so I'll make my own decision about joining a gang. Senator should look in his own backyard. What about the complete disregard of the universal rights of people who the U.S. government incarcerates without any recourse to courts or a lawyer? If you're an alien, illegal alien, what rights do you have according to our Constitution? Zilch. There are no rights. There are a lot of people that think that everyone has rights, regardless of where you're from, etc. That's actually wrong. Strictly speaking, you have to be a citizen to have rights. Am I right about that?
What about basic human rights? I mean, I would think those would be global.
Well, we do have, thanks to Eleanor Roosevelt. Yes? Eleanor Roosevelt. We have this. She that was after her husband had died. She ran the committee, which then had, as of now, I think most countries have signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, if you read it, sounds pretty good, but there's no enforcing agency, so there's no official contract between anybody over this. Plus, all of these are subject to interpretation. So when you say everybody's entitled to basic human rights, we shoot you in the head because it's nicer instead of torturing you all day before we shoot you. Basic human rights. Miserable. I don't know, what accent was that? I was trying to... Russian?
Sounds Russian.
Or Kazakhstan, maybe.
Yeah.
So tu quoque. Break the rules, well, I'll break the rules. It's fair. That's basic. Fallacies based on emotional appeals. So appeal to the people, which is referred to as argumentum ad populum, right? Argumentum ad populum. This is the fallacy according to democracy. Appeal to the people. So, How about this as an example? Yesterday, I think it was, the Tonys were just presented, and one of the Tony Awards was given to the new Harry Potter play. Anybody see it? No, because you have to go to New York to see it, or London. I don't know if you could see it in both places, but Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, right? Was the name of the new play? Yes?
I have no idea.
So it won the Tony, which I guess means that it was the best play last year. Is that what that means? Tony Awards?
Tonys are for music, aren't they?
Right. It's theater, so it's just a play. It's not a musical play. It's a play. No, totally different cast than were in the movie. Remember when they did their original casting? It was quite controversial because Hermione is black in the play. So that's pretty cool, right? She was on the stage in the Tonys too, and it occurred to me that the photograph that was on the website and in the newspaper this morning, I think it was in the paper this morning, maybe it was the website last night. The picture that they took of the group on the stage, she was hidden behind one of the other persons.
Oh,
Why did they do that? However. In any case, you never even saw it, and the Tonys are given to the best play of the year. So who decides that it's the best play? Not the people.
the board.
The committee, basically.
Well,
They're the same folks that gave this prize. Well, not the same folks, but the same kind of committee that gave this out years ago. Have you ever heard this song? It's hard out here for a pin. Yes?
Yeah.
So what year did that win? That won an Oscar, right?
It was like 10 years ago or something.
10 years ago.
So it was something like that.
From the movie Hustle and Flow.
Yeah, from Hustle and Flow. Oscar. Yeah, I won't play it. It's tough.
I thought I read something recently, like in the past couple months, where the head chair on the committee for the Oscars admitted that he was only really picking movies that his granddaughter was suggesting that, and his granddaughter's like at a younger age, so she would pick like, Boss Baby or whatever in the younger children's movies.
Well, I have no clue how they actually pick out the best movies, best song, best production. There's lots of categories, lots of different movie types. Best actor, best actress, best other actor. I don't know what they're.
Best side actor,
all that kind of stuff. I don't know how they pick it,
Best extra.
but they certainly don't ask for everybody in the United States to vote on it. Like Miss Universe.
Be like
Who gets to
America's
pick
Got
Miss
Talent
Universe?
of movies.
We don't even ask other planets in the galaxy, let alone other planets in the universe, and yet we decide Arnold Schwarzenegger is Mr. Universe.
Well, I mean, they might just send out radio signals and they don't pick up and answer in time.
yeah, we asked, they didn't answer, right? So as far as we know, we're the only ones in the universe, so best in the universe. Even baseball, when we have the World Series, we actually don't even let any other countries play. Right?
Yeah.
However, the point I'm trying to make is that people voting on what is the best, or the best song, the best answer, is considered fallacious. That's not how you figure out the best of anything, by asking the vote of the people. Strictly speaking, a democracy is a fallacious form of government because you're letting the people choose. And guess what? What's the average intellect among the people?
He's either going to go for whoever looks good or whoever talks smart.
No, they hate those people.
George Carlin once said, imagine how stupid the average person is and realize half the people are dumber than that. So that kind of gives you...
Well, I love Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the second president I lived under. Famously, as I understand it, was told that the average American, like only has an average education or something like that, and he immediately was upset, but we've got to fix that. Which basically meant that he misunderstood the nature of average, right? 'Cause that's the average. So we're getting average choices. You wouldn't go to the average doctor for a heart transplant. You wouldn't go to a scientist. What would you go to a scientist for laws? About stuff. This is a book by Philip Kitcher, who is a professor in the United States, but I believe he was originally British. I'm not sure. But he's been teaching all his career in the United States. And this book argues that we ought to let science somehow rule when it comes to the kinds of laws that we need in order to take care of the biosphere, ecology, oil, all those kinds of things. Don't have a democracy making those kinds of laws. Instead, have scientific committees present the democracy with options. You could do this or this. Anything else would be ridiculous, right? And that way you've got good choices, and then the people can select from those. That's his solution. But you don't let the people decide, oh, we like coal. Coal is good for us, right? And then everybody tries to figure out how they can start using coal again. I'm not sure of that myself. I know that the commercials they have locally that say we should go back to good, clean coal. It's like, but gas is way cleaner than coal, way cleaner than good, clean coal. That would be certainly an example of a fallacy in advertisements, right? That they, we should go back to cheaper, good, clean coal, because it's not like clean coal is really clean enough to be comparable to something like gas, which is incredible. By the way, they encourage you to ride your bicycle instead of a car, right? Everybody's heard that? Yes? Why do people use cars instead of bicycles?
So snow.
Snow?
Yeah,
Weather? Yeah, even with fat wheels, etc. How much energy do you use pedaling a bicycle? How much energy do you use driving a car?
Almost none.
Unless you're a bad driver.
Yeah.
You don't use your own energy, but in the car you burn way more energy.
Not including the resources it took to make the car.
Right, I understand that, but they're incredibly affordable, actually. Really, cars. I mean, compared to bicycles, I mean, some of the bicycles in town are thousands of dollars. Cars you could get for $500. I saw one on the Glen Highway that was sitting there for days. $500.
The van?
It was a van.
I've seen a bike on the side of the Glen.
In fact, I think the person who put that $500 on the, if you called them and offered to take it from them for free, I bet they were so angry with it, they would have given it to you. I'm not going to do all the math, but I suggest that driving your car from point A to point B is actually more efficient than riding a bicycle. Well, I think the amount of energy that you would use to pedal it from there to there would actually add more carbon into the atmosphere than you're driving the gasoline-powered engine from there to there. I think, but I'm not sure. But it just puzzles me. We're all into, I mean, I'm definitely interested in keeping the Earth a viable ecosystem into millions of years into the future. But it's just an awful lot of the things that ecology seems to argue for doesn't really seem to be well thought out. Does that make sense? Drive your bike to work day, you use more energy doing that than everybody just drove their cars. The reason the gasoline engine is so economically important to us is because it's so incredibly efficient. And you can tell that by the price, the literal price of it. Does that make sense? Nobody feels like it? So appeal to the people. This is like saying democracy works. Same thing with Wikipedia. How many of you have had teachers that are upset with you using Wikipedia as a resource? The main argument against it, of course, is that anybody can add stuff to Wikipedia, although I don't think that's really true anymore. Right? I know some of the websites like Israel, if you look up Israel on Wikipedia, it was like an incredible fight constantly because there were all these different folks trying to add their own take on what Israel was. So finally Wikipedia had to say there's a committee, you have to submit your potential changes to a committee and it has to be evaluated, etc. Right? Interesting. But basically what teachers complain about is that it's not peer reviewed. So if you're going to do research, you have to use peer-reviewed research. In other words, democracy is illegal for research.
You just go to the cited source on Wikipedia and use that, and the teachers are okay with that. They're just not okay with the actual Wikipedia.
Oh, right. I've heard that argument, and I understand it. But at the same time, that's almost like we're saying, we're living in a democracy, well, theoretically, right? Which means we the people. Yes?
It's a republic.
Yes, it's a representative democracy. But nonetheless, theoretically, people rule, right? We the people, right? But if you think about it, since the average intelligence, average knowledge base of the population, if we really voted for what we wanted, we would end up with pretty dumb choices. Is that right? Monday's a really tough day to get people to be upset about anything.
So what you're saying is as if we never got past voting for homecoming king and for the popularity contests and circus.
Yeah, well, or maybe it's the sword and the stone thing, or the watery tart out in the lake, handing out swords. That's no way to base it. The basis of government, right?
You're lucky enough to pass by me on this specific day. Here's the holy sword, and you can proclaim yourself as king.
So,
That's good.
but traditionally, a democracy is considered one of the worst forms of government. We go back to the invention of theories of government, which would be Greek. Plato and Aristotle both thought democracies were terrible. But what instead you should have is the rule of the aristoi, the best, which is the basis for an aristocracy. But of course, what they meant was the intelligent, the wise, the ones who know and have the best interest of the government, the people at heart. They're the ones that ought to rule because they know the best choices to make. But when it got to the deme, the democracy, right? They're the hoi polloi, they're the riffraff, right? Mob rule, basically. In other words, right? And the only solution that would help that would be if they are educated. So Thomas Jefferson famously wanted mandatory education for all the citizens, right? So that you end up with a polity, a wise government of the people. The problem, of course, is our education system hasn't succeeded in raising the educational level. Well, we have. We're literate, etc. I've talked with some folks about training people in other countries to become soldiers. And if they don't have a literate education, you can't do it, right? There's no way. And so there's no way you can train people in certain countries with a low education level to become the same kind of soldiers that we have in our military, so we're never going to end up with the kind of military already there, homegrown, that we could furnish for them. How many of you would like to vote for the military to, since you're already in the military, you can't vote for this. But how many of you would like our military to basically have bases in 150 countries throughout the world in order to make sure that all those countries are stable for the best interests of our American businesses? Raise your hand. What do you think? Nobody? But that's how many countries we're actually in, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, it's not what we think.
Yeah, that's where we are. I think as far as I know, we've already got soldiers, airmen in 150 countries in the world, from what I understand. Amazing. Cool. Appeal to pity. Well, this happens like when grades are due, when I've got to turn in your grades. And people come to me and they say, I couldn't do the test because half of the members of my family died when the house burned down. That's really sad. And as a matter of fact, it's true, because I mean, I checked the paper and I could see, yes, your family, that happens, that happens. And yet, on the other hand, that doesn't mean that I should give you an A, because, why, after all, you would have done the work except for the fact that life sucks. No, actually, life sucks, and so since you didn't do the work, you don't get an A. That's how that works. It doesn't mean that you ought to, my Audi is outside, so you don't need to slash my tires, please. Those are expensive tires. So appeal to pity. Your Honor, before you sentence my client for the murder of his parents, I ask you to consider his situation. He's an orphan.
But he's a murderer.
Well, he's an orphan because he killed his parents.
Because he killed his parents.
Well, he would have been an orphan.
Have pity on this poor orphan. By the way, Voldemort's father was a Muggle. So how come he's...
He hated his father.
Yeah, that's the big twist
Tom
in the
Riddle.
books, is that he's
I haven't read the book, that's why.
So appeal to force. This is This is the ad baculum. I'll beat you up. I'll cut your salary if you don't do such and such. Notice these are psychologically persuasive. If you want a good review, don't mention that so-and-so harassed you or whatever. Summary of fallacies. So this is based on personal attacks, the ad hominem circumstantial, poisoning the well, tu quoque, and based on emotional appeal to the people. That one, by the way, we talk about forever because whether or not appeal to the people or whatever is a solution to anything. You figure out the best movie based on sales, ticket sales. Is that what makes it the best movie? Or there are other, issues associated with what you call the best movie. I mean, Sundance Festival was basically a response to the Oscars, as far as I know. The Oscars are basically appealing to popularity of things, whereas Sundance appeals to some sort of intellectual analysis of the quality of the production. Does that make sense? Most of the movies are not very popular, and most of us wouldn't go see them. I think the only place in town where you can go see them, apart from maybe Netflix, is to go to Beartooth when they have like 50 movies all at once.
Mondays.
Mondays.
In art house Mondays and stuff.
Let's do a couple. So this is page 130. Determine whether each statement is true or false. How did that get in there? Tu quoque is distinguished by the specific attempt of one person to avoid the issue at hand by claiming the other person is a hypocrite. The answer is true. But how about number 2? Ad hominem fallacies occur when an argument uses character flaws or circumstances of people's lives to reject their claim. True. Sounds true. Appeal to pity occurs when the character flaws of the person are used against him or her. False. That's not good. Appeal to fear or force uses rational reasoning in support of a controversial position. False. Guys, getting all of these right. Sorry. No apologies accepted. You're brilliant, you're brilliant. Remember, I've already convinced you that you're absolutely much more brilliant than I am. There's a Flynn effect.
I've forgotten this last time.
I was going to say false.
Without a check, because they didn't focus on the average.
Which?
The Flynn effect that you took short
The
of?
Flynn effect?
Yeah, it was saying that the average goes up a little bit. But
Right.
we might be above average. So we might be
Well,
below average.
everyone in Eagle River is above average. And all the, because the average person lives down in the lower 48. And you're all living way above average.
90 to 110 instead of the average IQ.
That was a joke. I switched the frame. That's good. So that's rigid. Oh, okay. So generalization fallacies. Generalization fallacy occurs when an argument relies on a mistaken use of the principles behind making a generalization. So actually, I just did that by saying you're all living above average. That's a fallacy based on generalization. Everybody here. Actually, I'm convinced you're all above average.
Well, just us being in college kind of.
That puts you in the top 25% of the state, just by your being here.
What about the country?
That's more complex. I'm not sure about the statistical relationships there. I mostly focus on Alaska. I have some issues in Alaska.
True that.
especially with fetal alcohol and things of that sort. We've got some real issues here. And I think just true confessions here. One of the reasons I'm a professor here is because me being a professor in U of P, no. Harvard, forget it. They wouldn't even consider. I might not be able to get in as a graduate student there, let alone professor. But I put in my request to teach here in '95, and they called me the next day and said, "Oh, come on in."
Why do you think that is, though, that you would be in
No competition.
No, I mean not to apply for UAA in particular, but for...
You could apply to go to Harvard. They will take.
No, I'm saying you.
Take you in a
You said
heartbeat.
you wouldn't be eligible to teach there.
Well, I only have a master's degree,
You only have a master's degree?
so I'm not even eligible.
So you want like a PhD or above?
I believe so. That would be the minimum.
I guess. Is there anything?
What's our budget? So, plus I'm too ugly.
How's that factor?
You should see the faculty at Harvard. They're beautiful.
They're smart, they're so beautiful.
I mean, well, this is really the sexiest philosophy professor. Oh, no.
What happened?
Drops out, and it's not only not a duty, it's contrary to duty.
That sounded very appealing.
Obviously, I'm sexist, so, you know, this is a female philosophy professor. I'm not going to look at David Chalmers and say, oh, he's the sexy. No.
Yeah, but I bet they'd hire Stephen Hawking to...
Well, they can't.
You can't, yeah.
Well, not now.
Yeah, that would be a dilemma.
When I heard about that, I felt alone for some reason. I felt worried. Just because, like...
I was just trying to say he's not the most attractive person. Not to be mean, but... Fallacies, right?
I'm joking about faculty at Harvard being beautiful. That's subjective anyway. But I do think she's absolutely... Now, granted, she's my age. She's older than me by maybe, 10 years, so she doesn't look like this anymore.
That was her in her prime.
I wouldn't even say that's her prime.
But we age slower in Alaska because it's like a giant refrigerator.
That's right. Nothing goes bad in the freezer.
Glacial water. Basically ocean.
Glad you're all joking.
I'm
All
freezing.
just-
Yeah,
Freezer
that's a
burn.
joke. That's what I'm still falling out right now.
A rigid application. I can't believe the police didn't give the driver of that ambulance any citations. He was speeding, he went through a red light, and the ambulance swerved from lane to lane. Now, of course, it turns out he's a police officer. That's why he didn't get a ticket. So you can't, so, right, if you're, this is middle of page 135 in the blue. You know, the reason the person is confused is obviously this driver breaks all these rules, but it's actually a police car with the siren on. So they're allowed to break all those rules. So the over-application of the generalization rule is what's silly in this particular law. So hasty generalization. Argument that relies on a small sample and is unlikely to represent the population. You could be thinking about how jokes make use of some of these. Hasty generalization is certainly one of those that people use. So for example, Jim Gaffigan talking about what's Disney World like? Well, imagine going to the DMV and standing there. That's it. Right? Well, there's hastiness in this generalization on several accounts. One, DMV might not be crowded. You might not have any line there at all, right? Plus, Disney World, by the way, the best time to go is in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. nobody is there. Everybody's home getting ready for Christmas.
Everybody's there getting ready.
Nobody's there, and it's beautifully decorated, and you could run from one thing to the next. There's no lines, and it's not hot. In fact, you could freeze your butt off. Yes.
Never go in May.
Never go in May.
Because that's when all the schools go.
Oh,
There's 50,000 groups of 50,000
They actually
children.
keep people, turn people away now. They get, they can pass.
There's only
I used
like
to live in Orlando.
the one in LA.
Turn people away. So
Also
that's,
Yeah,
that's
this
fine.
is where it was crowded. The one in LA was
Yeah, go during the weekdays, because people are usually at work and not off that.
But not in May.
Because it's so like,
May,
They're
May,
there all the time.
May is a rough
not
month.
really
for
noisy,
honestly,
it's
though,
like human.
Yeah, you can actually buy guides that tell you when to go, and they give you the statistics on, you know, when it's crowded, etc. It was fun. I don't know if people can still do that sort of thing. Ever since virtual reality came out, I'm like, I go anywhere. You put the goggles on and like, whoa, and I'm in my living room.
You can.
Do you have the goggles?
Yes, I have an Oculus Rift.
You can wait in line in VR.
That would be hilarious.
My friends all travel to one friend just went to Vilnius. Anybody know where Vilnius is?
I've never
Never
been
heard
there.
of it. But yeah, he went there and a building attacked him. As he was walking along the street and he was looking down at his feet and he walked into a building and it smashed his head. The building jutted out. But so I went to Vilnius with my Oculus Rift just for free. No wishing myself in a metal cube.
Oh, you didn't.
Hurtling
You
through
didn't get
space at
attacked?
500 miles an hour.
Do you not
or
like airplanes?
Not anymore. The Oculus is so much more wonderful.
You can simulate being on an airplane in your Oculus Rift.
You gotta get a fan.
But so then you're retired, so you have.
It's like
You also have to get a
there.
baby about 2 rows back that won't
Actually, I
sit
haven't
down.
used
It's
it
shaking.
much since I've gotten my St. Bernard puppy. Because if you're your 60-pound puppy who still loves us so much that she wants to just jump on you and
Who
love
still-
you to death.
Who still thinks she's a
And
lapdog.
if you were sitting there with goggles on, you don't see it coming. That could be bad. I haven't traveled with my Oculus, but I don't understand why people would go anywhere.
We should have downloaded a program for your Oculus Rift that would have simulated a puppy.
That wasn't my fault. I have a daughter who insisted on the puppy. So that's why we had the puppy. And guess what? Now she's taken a job in Kenai.
You're stuck
Your
with the
puppy.
And I'm going to be stuck with the puppy.
What's the puppy's name?
Denali. We, of course, have been.
A lot of pictures last week.
Sorry about. By the way, Martha, here she is in a. You can see she's older.
Illnesses and
What happens?
It's not her crime.
loved ones, episodes of
She's even more powerful today than
illness
ever.
in our
She's
lives.
amazing.
I like to think it was the Diet Coke that changed her. You're saying her hair looked delicious. I'm not saying
You have to hit show password.
I don't know that I'll remember it.
Put the password in the first.
What did I type?
That's why you have to hit show password.
Ah, I'm in. So what do I want to show you? Pictures. So here's. So this is my dog. That was last week. This is her first visit to a lake. I didn't let her go in. That's my granddaughter there. And that's our dog. Saying goodbye to a friend. So that's my dog. That's a chair. Uh-huh. So I take pictures. I'm a Facebook fan. Was that entertaining?
Yes.
I'd like to see more.
You can friend me.
Let's just go through your entire Facebook
I
history.
friend you. As long as you're like.
You don't want
name
to
is
see what
in-
I put. I'm just.
One of the latest ones I got was sexy cutie.
Well, that was me.
That was you? I said no. Sorry.
Broken. Don't worry, I got another account I can request you from.
Hasty generalization. Composition and division. Notice these two always are together, and they're always confusing. Because composition is when someone makes an attribute of individual parts and applies it to the whole thing. So, say for example, you think, oh, this person I know is a terrific oboist. He has a great oboe.
It's like a cello, right?
Oboe?
It's like a trumpet.
It's a double
brass
lead string instrument. No. Double
I don't know
lead.
what it is.
That's string.
Kind of a
He
crown.
shows.
It's like a clarinet, but it doesn't have a single reed and a
You really
It's
classical
very,
oboe.
very thin.
No, I was
double
just trying to
reed.
get us off track a little bit.
I thought you said elbow.
Oboe.
Well, that's
Elbow.
That's what he ended up
I
getting you
was
to
joking.
think of when he.
So we got a great elbowist and a great sax player and a great violinist and a great drummer. Wow, I bet you guys are a great band. And then you hear them all together and it's like, turn it off. That's the fallacy of competition. All these brilliant people and you put them all together in a room and they end up with hysteria. It's composition. Division, on the other hand, is, wow, the orchestra is fantastic. I've listened to them play 1812 Overture, bum, 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 bum. The cereal blowing out of the cannons, etc. And you play in the orchestra? Wow, you must be great. And then you hear the person play, and it's like, ugh, turn it off. That's fallacy of division. But you could do that with other things, like car is heavy. Did you ever try to pick up a car?
Yes.
With a jack.
One of my favorite postcards was from an elderly couple that drove the Alcan Highway, and they had a picture on the postcard of the woman holding the car up while the old man was rolling the tire to change the tire. You could just see that she was holding the whole car up.
Was it a smart car?
That's silly. Because obviously that could not happen.
There's a green screen.
But cars are heavy, and so this is a part. Well, it's a part from the car. Whoa, you got to order it by mail. I don't want to pay for that. I bet that would be heavy. But it's actually just a little part. So it wouldn't be heavy. That's a fallacy. Which would it be, though? Composition or division? Division. See how easy they are to get confused. Biased sample. This is every sample ever. Right? They call 200 people and ask them about their sex life, and then they tell you, oh, this is the Kinsey report. Everybody must have sex at least 3 times a week, otherwise you're not normal. Kinsey report. Actually, the Kinsey report is famous for being biased because they only asked college students. And a very weird college, must be. I'll tell you, at any of the colleges I've ever been, that's not the norm.
What is that?
In fact, there are some colleges I've been to that, if if anybody's having sex, it's illegal.
BYU?
Because they're all male, you know?
It's kind of like the Family Feud where they ask 100 people, and these were the most popular answers.
Yeah, what the heck, you know, but then they have the gall to tell you at the bottom, this is 96% correct. How do they figure that out? They asked 200 people what they thought of who will be elected, and then based on their sample, they tell you this is 96% correct. But have they ever asked you, were you ever polled about who was going to be elected president of New Guinea? Uganda?
That would be interesting.
Canada? Any of those? No, they never call us and ask us for our opinion. So they're obviously not asking everybody, you know. But someday, we'll be able to do this because of The Circle. You seen the movie The Circle?
I know the premise of the movie though.
Oh, absolutely fascinating. I highly recommend it. I've watched it about 3 or 4 times.
Was it never ending?
Pardon?
Was it just never ending?
The Circle? No, it's kind of a movie based on what, Facebook or Google. Tom Hanks is the.
Changed it.
Ah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So buy a sample. False cause fallacies. For example, post hoc. The fallacy occurs from the mistaken assumption that just because one event occurred before another, obviously God didn't want me talking about false cause.
Like you snap and the light goes out, and then you snap because, or the light went out because you snapped.
You feel that all the hair on my neck went up because of zap. God doesn't want me to speak of that. Researchers have discovered that for over 30 years there has been a definite pattern connecting the party affiliation of the U.S. president and specific soft drink sales. God bless you. Actually, I could do a better one. Ted Kennedy supported a committee to investigate the cancerous possibilities associated with refined sugar. And by the way, studies showed that refined sugar is cancerous. So everybody switched to the yellow stuff, I think it was at the time. Equal? Which one was equal?
Equals pink.
Which is the old
Sweet and
one?
Low's pink.
Sweet and low?
Sweet and Low's
I
pink.
don't remember.
Equals
So
yellow
everyone
and yellow is-
switched to the other thing. And then they did a study on that. And I still remember the picture of the mouse. They did a study of a mouse that they had given like a ton of this
You mean saccharin?
sweetener. Saccharin? It was
The
saccharin.
first artificial sweetener that was really.
That was, yeah, so that's the one. And they gave, like way more saccharin to this mouse than possible, I think. And somehow it ended up with this great big cancerous cyst on the back, and we all saw that's what this does to you. And like, whoa, and everybody went right back to refined sugar. And then they came out with another, and back and forth. And every single time this happened, it turned out that Ted Kennedy had ahead of time, knowing what the results were going to be, sold all of his stock in the one, bought stock in the other, and then when everybody went the other way, then he sold that and went back. So he made a fortune on the results of these scientific studies that were done by a science committee that was funded by his committee, and so remember his grandfather made all of his money, and that's the reason that Kennedys are rich, by bringing whiskey, scotch, bootleggers, yeah, during the Prohibition. So, this goes to show. Slippery slope. Everybody loves this one. Go to the next one. Everybody's heard of the slippery slope before, right? Right? It works the way it sounds. If you've ever been on like a grassy, mossy, especially moss, how slippery it is. And you start one step off and all of a sudden, you just go right on down. Same thing happens with skiing, sledding, right? So you're all familiar with that, right? I cannot believe that people go up the gondola in Girdwood, up to Alyeska, go up to the top of that mountain, put slippery boards on their feet, and slide down that mountain, and don't die. It's amazing to me. I've been up there, but I, of course, take the gondola back down. There's no way I'm going to put boards on my feet and close my eyes and shove off.
There's the bunny hill.
I'm too scared to use that one.
But it's like this.
See this one shoulder? How my shoulder hangs down? That's because it's been popped out of its socket too many times. Skiing. Sorry. The doctor told me, do this one more time and I'm going to cut you. So, skis, sold them all. Slippery slope. If you start down that hill, you just go all the way, right? And so, of course, it's like, well, if you allow this kind of abortion, before long, we'll be killing all of the children. No one will have any children, not because Jim Gaffigan know what having 4 children is like.
I've had a skiing accident where he tumbled and his ski got shoved up the back of his shirt.
Oh, I was afraid
and
you
he
were
just kept going down. Oh.
One time I was going off a jump, I did a backflip, and both my skis popped off in the middle of the backflip. It was awesome.
Did you live?
Yeah.
No.
But then one time my skis weren't on correctly, and they both fell off, or one of them fell off on the ski lift, so I had to go all the way down on one ski. Yeah, it took me like 15 minutes to go.
When I first came here in 1987, the 106 MI Battalion was a brand new battalion in the 6th Infantry Division Light. And none of the people had been in an infantry, well, I guess they had been in infantry, but none of them had been in ski conditions before, as far as I know. And the supply sergeants ordered skis and bindings for everyone, and didn't know what sizes. And by the way, when you get bindings for your feet, you have to know size. Well, they didn't, so they ordered yellow for everybody, which is medium, right? And so, no matter what size foot you had, you were out there trying to. Pardon?
Medium, it's average.
Yeah, it's average. Yeah. So of course, if you had too large a foot, you couldn't get the binding on. If you were too small, they wouldn't stay on, etc. Right? Well, the colonel, for the very first time, once the skis were issued, ordered everyone to show up in a pass and review formation at normal interval on skis. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, by the way, I had a manual that said if you're going to have a formation on skis, you're supposed to be at single pole intervals, double pole intervals, depending on what you're going to do. Well, he had us fall in, colonel, right, had us fall in at normal interval as if we were going to march with our skis on, which meant that all of the skis were interlaced. And at that point then he said, pass in review, which meant the entire unit all started to march in skis with bindings that weren't working well.
Some people didn't even have the
Some of us didn't even have any ski training at all. And guess what? It was like somebody with a machine gun was shooting the unit down. Because, just whole ranks went running all over the place. This is at 7:00 a.m. in the dark on the field that's now where all the cars have to go through the checkpoint. Memories. Well, all right. Do you have any questions on these fallacies so far? Begging the Question. This is a favorite. This is page 150. So in Latin, this is petito principi. Begging the question. The Beatles are the greatest band of all time, so it is safe to say that no band has ever been better than the Beatles. That's a lie. The Beatles aren't the greatest band of all time. But what's happening is you're not really giving premises supporting your conclusion, you're restating the conclusion. So you're just basically concluding the same thing that you've already given. So Hitler was the voice of the people. Who said so? Hitler said he was the voice of the people. Ein Volk, ein Führer, right? So, circular reason. Interesting problem for human beings is that all of our reasoning is essentially circular. If you get a deductive argument, it's deductively valid. It's the best kind of argument to have. The conclusion must be already contained in the premises, which means that I'm just circularly reasoning, which means that it's a fallacy. So, bad news is we have no really good, surefire way of arguing. Knowledge. How do I know? Just guessing. Complex question. Do you still cheat on your taxes?
Absolutely.
Or my favorite, the cop pulls you over. Are you still using drugs? If you say no, that sounds like you used to. If you say yes, that means you are, right? So it's a yes or no question. It's a complex question. They've framed the question in such a way that no answer you give is going to. And so what do you do in that situation? You have to grab the horns of the dilemma. This is.
You could just say never, though.
I mean, you could actually escape that one by not giving a yes or no, by saying I've never used drugs. But I suppose police might actually really use those kinds of questions because if they're dealing with someone who's on drugs or alcohol, they might gave it up yesterday. I don't know how that works. Have you ever watched those police cameras though, where they're pulling someone over and the person can't even toe the line? Or, why are you driving when you're like this? Well, I can't walk when I'm like this.
Have you seen the one where the guy can dance and say the alphabet backwards? It's like, wow, you're really good. He's like, no, I'm just drunk.
That's Reno 911.
Was it Reno 911?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, he in the TV show, then the officer gets him to do the dance and everything, and starts creating a step dance to everything. It's great.
That was really funny.
There was a joke in the other book. This isn't the same thing, but the guy was on trial for armed robbery or whatever, and he was found not guilty. And he said, "Oh, that's great. Does that mean I get to keep the money?"
Well, once you've been tried, you can't be tried again for the same crime, right?
Yeah, double jeopardy. Appeal to Ignorance. This one's a good movie. Famous. What's the name of the movie?
Double Jeopardy.
Oh, Double Jeopardy. Appeal to Ignorance. No, UFOs must exist because no one has proven that they don't. Those are fun.
4 I'm Batman because you've never seen me and Batman in the same room together.
Got the shirts right. Appeal to an unqualified authority. That's updated. It used to be appeal to authority. But obviously, you do appeal to authorities. Who else are you going to ask? The problem is you get individuals like, if I'm going to buy sneakers for me, do I need to go to a basketball player that's 8 foot tall and buy his Air Jordans or whatever they are, and pay $140 a pair?
If you're doing the exact same stuff he is, sure.
Can you fit the shoe set?
Yeah.
I could sleep in the shoes that he wouldn't need to buy a sleeping bag. I would just take one of those shoes, put it in my backpack if it would fit. When I get to the hilltop, I could just sleep in his sneaker.
How small is your backpack?
Amazon sent me all kinds of backpacks. I don't know why. 30 different backpacks. False dichotomy. Well, what about, let's think about unqualified authority though. What if the Pope says, thou shalt not commit abortion or have an abortion? It's a moral authority.
Do you follow that religion?
If he is your authority, because he may not be everybody's authority.
Well, even if you do follow his religion, Catholic, where does he get his authority?
Self-proclaimed.
God?
God is
Das Finger Gottes. Of course, there was this one guy was in, I guess he was in the Middle East somewhere, surrounded by the enemy, bloodthirsty enemy. He says, oh God, I'm screwed. And God responds and says, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm surrounded by all these. He says, wow, you're not screwed yet. No, I screwed up the joke. He says, take that rock and bash the leader's head in. And then God says, now you're screwed. I totally messed that one up. Sorry. But the problem with an unqualified authority is who qualifies the authority. It used to be that you would have people like Ben Casey, who was a TV actor in a TV show where he was a doctor, and he would be on commercials wearing his doctor outfit from the TV show and advertise medications or something, like Anacin or some kind of pain reliever or whatever. And the complaint, I don't think they're allowed to do that anymore. You're not allowed to disguise yourself, even as an actor, as if you were an authority advertising a particular product. Has to be the real guy, the guy, this is my pillow, it's the best pillow, you'll get the best sleep. Buy my pillow, and if you buy now, you'll get 2 of them for the price of 1. If you send your money in right now, I'll give you 50 of them for the price of 1.
Exclusive TV offer, you even get a mini pillow for your feet.
Exactly. False dichotomy. This is where you get a question where you really don't have a choice. G or L, not L, so therefore you have to take G. It's actually a valid argument. I'm not entertaining these guys in the fallacies of diversion. Okay, so talking about jokes, one of them in fallacies we always call it equivocation, but in jokes we always call it a pun. So some of the Gaffigan stuff you can pick would be more puns. lost it, didn't I? Good. Oh, there he is.
No longer a sock, now I'm just kind of a sack. You could store marbles in me, but that sock business is over. That meant the underwear too, the elastic, because like the underwear saying, I quit, I'm tired of covering your ass. This job stinks. I'm not gonna take your crap anymore. Other puns. It's good to be here in DC. I love DC. I know.
So I'm not going to take your crap anymore. In this case, he's talking about underwear. The horrible pun is real crap versus hypothetical crap, right? So, all right. So that was an attempt at humor. This is supposed to be fun. So equivocation is a pun. My favorite joke about the little baby duck, why do little baby ducks walk softly? The little baby ducks can't walk hardly. Not sure if that's a pun. It might be amphibole, which is in here too, but not the next one. They're very similar. Equivocation is where you're talking about the meaning of one particular word is switched, but amphibole is when a whole phrase is misused. So that's straw man. So literally, if you could imagine someone building a doll out of straw and dressing them up, putting a mask on them. We've seen this political rallies, you know, in other countries usually, where they have someone and then they usually burn the straw man because straw burns really easily. You know, easy to do that and make fun of a particular individual who's the straw man. Of course, if it was the real person, you'd have the, you know, if it was George Bush, President Bush, you're not going to be able to burn him because he's not a straw man. So the real man is much more difficult to argue with, to combat, than the straw man. So the idea of the name of this is you're cheapifying the argument. You're making it easy for you to argue against the individual's argument.
More of a one-sided argument.
Right. Yeah. So you're cheapening the argument. Red herring, this is where you're distracting them with something that has nothing to do with it, the real argument. Misleading precision, that's like the clean coal argument. Missing the point. The premises that seem to lead logically to one conclusion are used instead to support an unexpected conclusion. So I read that it can take years to find the black boxes that contain crucial flight information regarding an airplane crash. And sometimes they are never found. Given this, all air travel should be suspended. That's pretty dumb. That's quick. But if we all switch to Oculus Rift Eye, that's way cheaper than flying. I mean, flying to, say, New Zealand would cost more than buying one Oculus Rift, for sure. Plus a year's worth of internet, so that you could actually travel to New Zealand. In fact, you could travel around New Zealand so much you get bored of New Zealand without ever having to go to New Zealand.
It's gonna be cool if you're gonna go travel. You can get familiarized with the area before you go.
That's true. Some of my friends argued, talking about the Oculus Rift this way, that was really dumb. They planted that tree so it would grow up and hit the roof. Sorry, that has nothing to do with it. That was a squirrel. wasn't really a red herring. It was sort of, but I did forget what I was talking about.
New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Your friends
Yeah, so talking about the Oculus Rift and others like that, which I think within years we're gonna have, everybody's gonna have these, like, you have cell phones now. And you're gonna use those to travel. You won't come to school. You'll wake up in the morning, the kids will put their Oculus Rift on.
And they'll be at school.
They'll be at school.
On private server with their teacher.
Which, just think of the expense that will save for everybody. Pretty cool.
But then you lose a lot of
Did you read Ready Player One yet?
No.
So, that was a pretty cheap way of going through the chapter. These are fun. Lots of good. A lot of these turn out to be jokes, by the way. And you can actually, it's not saying that fallacies are jokes and that they're equivalent. And that's not even a complete explanation of why jokes work, by the way. And so it's not that all jokes are fallacies, or that all fallacies are going to be funny. Obviously not, right? But it's kind of handy to bring up that relationship, I think, to think about those things. But we should take a break, and then we'll get to some really serious logic, if you don't mind. I hope you're ready for it. We'll start talking about Aristotle and categorical propositions.